We're on pace to save over $848,000 this year on supply chain expenses compared to last year. My name is Jassim East. I'm the CEO and founder of Voadera, a $100 million Amazon e-commerce marketplace company. And we shipped over 1 million units last year, so we paid a lot in supply chain expenses. In this video, I'm going to explain what supply chain is, why it's so crucial, especially in the e-commerce landscape, and the 10 lessons that we learned to save these costs that I mentioned, and even a bonus at the end that's absolutely critical to get right if you want to save on supply chain expenses. To get started, what is supply chain? So supply chain is simply the movement of your product, the journey it takes from the moment it's made until it reaches your end customer. It's not to be confused with like warehousing or logistics. These are definitely components of supply chain, but there's so much more within it. So there's, for example, demand planning, reverse logistics, the network design, all that kind of stuff. So it's just basically the comprehensive movement from the point your factory makes it, whether it's in China or America, all the way until it reaches your end customer. There are four primary expenses related to supply chain. The first one is actually the freight itself, the transportation, moving the products from point A to point B. Obviously, that's going to be the biggest one, and that's one of the primary components. The second one is related to supplies and materials. So that's the packaging, the boxes, tape, all that kind of stuff. The third one is labor. So any employees involved in shipping that, prepping it, organizing it, putting it on a shelf, all that kind of stuff. And the fourth one is overhead costs or fixed costs. There's a few of these you can think about, like SaaS, ERP system, WMS, warehouse management system, warehouse, obviously, that's a big one, like your rent, monthly rent, all that kind of stuff. There's obviously additional ones. I'm not going to get into the reverse logistics part of it or reimbursements and recovery. That's a huge hidden cost per se. I'm actually going to make a specific video about it soon. So make sure to like and subscribe so you can see that, but that's a huge component as well. But I wanted to delve into these four primarily for this video. To give a backstory of where we were a couple years ago and why it was so important that we get supply chain right. Just a few years ago, we were actually winging a lot of stuff, just to be honest. Like we weren't measuring everything. We were kind of gut feeling what's the best option. We were going with one thing all the time. And we realized that although our revenue was expanding year over year, we didn't see that reflected within the profit. We realized that we weren't taking advantage of a lot of profitability standards. We looked at a lot of components that weren't optimized, and even though we were, let's say, ignorantly, or we assumed that we were making much more profit than we were double doing a lot of work. For example, quality assurance twice, and I'll get into obviously the 10 lessons, but that's just the pain we were feeling, basically growing revenue, increasing sales, but not much on our bottom line. Now let's get into the 10 lessons. The first one, and the most important one, is visibility and tracking. Without visibility and tracking, you're just shooting in the dark, basically. You don't know what's going good, what's going bad. We had so many expenses and so many line items that we didn't know we were doubling up on. And we didn't know what was good and what was bad. Now we have the ability to compare warehouses to each other. We have the ability to compare, obviously, employee productivity, one compared to another. A good warehouse we can start emulating. And I can mention so many examples, but just one example, just looking at the line item, now we're seeing stuff that we're paying for twice. Examples, internet charges. We're paying because we got another warehouse next to us. We got another internet, but we could have just used the same one for both. And just analyzing and auditing all of that was absolutely critical to gain a further understanding on this. We developed two primary sheets to actually track ourselves. So if the first thing we did was we started measuring the biggest expense in supply chain, which is obviously transformation, the freight, moving something from one place to another. And that has to do with basically the KPI we used for that was cost per pound. We can use other stuff like another example is like cost per cubic foot or cost per dimensional weight, which is actually could be more accurate, just takes more to measure. But that's the main thing we're looking at, cost per pound. We're always looking to drive that down. How can we do it in a healthy way, continuously challenging ourselves. And the next thing we did was we created like a P&L for every like warehouse or division or line item, and that's basically breaking down all the various expenses from labor to supplies, materials, and just getting visibility into that, who's doing the best, how can we emulate them, all that kind of stuff. The second one was after obviously we built this visibility, we want to take advantage of it. So the second one was doing the audit, negotiating, and revisiting all these expenses, not taking anything for granted. Right now we're requiring actually quarterly like RFPs basically on major line items. That includes stuff like boxes, supplies, just revisiting those line items, just sending out quotes again, seeing what looks there. But some stuff we're actually doing RFPs on a per instance basis. An example of this is shipping domestically. For example, whenever we get a domestic shipment, you could be paying anywhere for like $2,000 to $5,000, sending it out to 3 brokers or 4 brokers, asking them what rate we can get. And just last week we shipped an FTL. The initial quote we got was $6,000. We sent it out to another person. We got it for $4,300. So that's $1,700 saved in one simple email. It's crazy. But sending out to numerous people, negotiating. Don't think anything is ever fixed. You can negotiate even the most obvious things. One of them is actually, you'll be surprised, Comcast and Xfinity. We were paying, I don't forgot what it was, but it was around like $200 to $300 a month. And we actually got RFPs. We were to negotiate it out. We got better rates. We called them. We were like, we want to cancel. I'm sorry. actually. And they're like, yeah, listen, don't cancel. We'll give you a 40% discount. The guy, like my warehouse manager, he came, he was like, what the heck? Did you know Comcast can give 40% discounts? And we started getting we literally cut that expense by like 40%. So I'm assuming, let's say we paid $300. Don't quote me exactly, but I just want to use a figure. Bringing that down 40%. So what is that? So that's like $120. That's $180. So $120 saved. Multiply that by 5 locations, because we have 5 warehouses across the United States for our partners. So that's $120 times 5. So what is that? Let's say $600. And then for a year, that's $7,200 just on one phone call that literally took a couple minutes. And then we're like, wow, this is crazy. Let's see what else we can do. And we started auditing other line items. Another cool example was recycling and trash. We were paying $2,000 a month for recycling, $2,000 a month for trash. We looked at the recycling, like a lot of this is boxes. What if we instead, and one of the team members came up with us, we give him a nice bonus, he deserved it. But what if instead of paying for this, we looked at getting a baler? It crushes all the boxes. We actually started getting paid. It was negligible, like $5 a pallet or whatever. But the point is, we saved the $2,000. So that's $25,000 a year on recycling that we saved with another, again, maybe this one took us longer, maybe a day or two, but it's still $25,000. So huge expense, negotiating everything, revisiting all that kind of stuff. It was monumental. The third one is building a dynamic shipping strategy. You want to be able to shift between the way you're shipping something. If you need to ship something in quick, it's not the same if you can wait on something and it can take time. If you're shipping different categories, you have to do different methods. A recent example was we usually use FTL, full truckload shipment, but we're still always bidding out, as you mentioned early in the point before, to see the best rate. So actually we were doing a tools shipment, and according to the warehouse Amazon wanted to send it in, we basically found out that shipping this SPD, small parcel delivery, was cheaper than FTL. We couldn't believe it. I mean, it just didn't make sense to us, but that was the rate Amazon was giving us, and we obviously went forward with it. That's just one example. I mean, so just being dynamic, understanding that shipping things through different warehouses. So we have 5 warehouses. If a partner is, for example, in Florida, we don't have to use the same route through Minnesota. That's our big warehouse. Everything has to come through here. No, we're using our Orlando warehouse, for example, and we're shipping it through there faster. If something is coming to California port, we're using that one. So we're also having warehouses with numerous loading docks. We can have numerous options, numerous carriers, numerous warehouses across the United States. So that's just being dynamic, flexible, training the team, having that mindset has been absolutely critical on cost savings. The fourth point is cutting distance and touch points. These are 2 semi-related things. Basically, you want as few people to touch your product as possible, and you want it to travel the least amount of distance possible. The ideal scenario of this, let's say you have a customer in Los Angeles, is you ideally want it to be made in Los Angeles and shipped to the customer right there, the same item shipped there. No touch points, factory to customer. That's la la land. That's not going to happen realistically. Theoretically, obviously, we can think about that with that mindset. So if we're shipping from factory, how can we ship from factory all the way to Amazon Fulfillment Center? We, for example, had a midpoint between factory fulfillment center where we did QA. Now we just got local people to that factory. We started doing the quality assurance there, and then we could still ship it. So not only did we skip the touch point of that warehouse and the fees that had, but also the distance. It had to travel less distance from the original point to the end point. So that's another advantage of that point as well. So that's for distance touch points. And then related to that, so for the 5th point, we actually were focused on increasing productivity, bringing down labor costs. Basically what we did is we had a lot of our managers take Lean Six Sigma, the basic, like I think it was like green belt, the basic belts, and Kaizen courses, all that kind of stuff, reducing waste. And what we did is we process mapped everything. So from the initial point all the way to the end point, and what processes could we delete from there, and which process could we make better? Just like we did with the audit, the P&L, each line item we revisited it. We also did that with the process. So a lot of things we could delete. One simple example is we were QCing, quality controlling, everything basically. We later found out that products, a lot of the shipments are already QC'd. So we started segregating when they came into the warehouse, things that needed QC and things that didn't. That alone increased productivity 32% approximately. And then another thing that we, for example, were able to do is remap the warehouse. So we initially, this is like a few years ago, again, we were not the smartest people. We learned with time. But we had an employee, his job was to move things out of the way when things had to be shipped. So let's say the loading dock was here, we needed storage for pallets because everything was clumsy. His job was just to move weight to make things pass through. Obviously, we redid the warehouse so things moved through the fastest way from in to out, and that's a very practical example. We obviously were able to relocate that employee to another place that was more productive for the business, but that's just an example of increasing productivity. The 6th point, maximizing for density. Density is the holy grail of supply chain. You want to maximize for this. You obviously don't want to crush your products, but you want to jam whatever you can. Just 2 instances, like for full truckload, we're paying $800 a truckload either way. If we put 1 unit unit or 100,000 units, it's the same thing. So we want to obviously fill as much as we can in that truckload. And that goes the same for everything else. The more dense you can get your products, the better it is for supply chain and costs. Another use case is actually we can use AWD. We were working with a partner previously, they were using AWD. They used to put 4 units in a box, and each box was 20 pounds. AWD now, it charges $2 processing fee in addition to other fees they have stored, but let's focus on this. I just want to hone in on something and I'll play it out later. But they charge $2 processing fee for moving each box from AWD to FB, regardless of how many units are in there. So what we did is we repackaged that box. We made it 10 units and 50 pounds. So now they went from paying $2 for 4 units, 50 cents a unit, to instead paying $2 for 10 units, 20 cents a unit. So they saved 30 cents on each and every single unit. We were able to relocate that to marketing, increase the velocity of the item. So that's indirectly, we moved actually the sales of the item from 3,000 units to 4,000 units because we were able to readjust some of the marketing. We did other stuff obviously with SEO, but that obviously helped too. So those 30 cents a unit were monumental. Let's just say we stayed at 3,000 units. That's 3,000 times 30 cents. That's $900 saved per month. Over $10,000 in the year. So it's obviously huge, the amount of savings that this had. So that's something to kind of keep in mind with density. And this is just one area where they've saved money. We also saved on boxes used. So each box costs $2. Now we're paying, the larger box obviously costs $3, but for every 2 boxes or 2.5 boxes, we're now using 1 box with the big ones. So let's say that the $2 a box, that was another 50 cents a box. Now we're paying $3 for 10 units. That was 30 cents a unit. Before we're paying 50 cents a unit on the cardboard box as well. And even the shipping was cheaper, shipping it to the AWD. So there were so many cost savings. That's why you want to get as dense as possible. You obviously don't want to damage your products. You want to be safe. That's why we have to make sure that we're maintaining, like we have over 15,000 reviews at 98% from customer feedback and happy customers that products aren't damaged. You obviously want to prioritize that and you just use common sense, but you want to optimize for density. The 7th point was actually leveraging local and bulk supply chains. A lot of the supplies and materials costs, they're just so big or so heavy that the cost of them comes in shipping. It's not like, for example, this pen, there's almost no cost in shipping. It's just finding the cheapest person. Whether that cheap person is in California, or let's say I'm in Minneapolis, they're in St. Paul, and it's not gonna make much of a difference. But for supply chain, it makes a huge difference because let's say for cardboard boxes, we were initially paying $3.30 for landed costs per cardboard here. We found someone locally, his per cost per box was more expensive, but the shipping was free because they're local. So they're charging us $2.48 as a whole. So that's just to show sorry, it was like more like $2.70. But the point is, it was a significant savings on the single item actually shipped, obviously, from there. And this goes for a lot of other stuff, poly bags, all that kind of stuff. And that's the first point, it's local, but also bulk. So when you're ordering more, you want to use the term price breaks. What's the price break for this item? Where can I get additional pricing? How can I leverage this pricing? And that's where you talk to the factories, you kind of get to know them, and you understand where the price breaks work, how you can get them, and everything related to that to make sure that as you're ordering more, there's certain price break, you're obviously going to get better prices. And that's what we're able to do with a lot of other supply items as well. The 9th point is getting ruthless with storage and inventory. So you want to hold as few inventory as possible for 2 reasons. 1, there's storage costs with warehouses, and 2, there's holding costs. That's dead inventory, it hurts cash flow, or it takes a long time to sell. So you want to minimize that. And this even comes to liquidation inventory. Excess inventory. If you have products that have been with you 9 months and it's crap and garbage, you just have to cut the losses. You don't want to get into sink cost fallacy. That product isn't going to become gold all of a sudden. Just cut the losses, throw in the garbage, dispose it, donate it, etc. It's not going to become magically profitable because you're continuously paying storage costs on it as well. And you're making 1 loss, 2 losses. 1 mistake, you over-ordered, or you ordered the wrong inventory. 2 mistakes, because you're also paying the storage costs on it daily. And the second part of this is also storing in the right places and storing the right amount. So I'll get into that briefly, but you just want to make sure as you're doing this, when you're storing the right amount, that you're measuring the KPI that we're using is days in stock. So we like to keep around 100 days net in stock. That includes stuff on the way, all that kind of stuff. You obviously don't want to be too crazy on days of stock, get to 10, and then you're always out of stock, because you want to manage average in-stock rate and days in stock. We're trying to be at around 98.7% in-stock rate and 100 days of supply. Actually, Andrew Grove right here, he talks about the importance of counter metrics. You don't want to measure only in-stock rate, and then you have 1,000 days of stock. You'll have 100% in stock. Obviously, that's easy. And you don't want to measure just days of supply, and you have 10 days of supply, but then your in-stock rate is like 40%. what's the point of that? So you want to find the right balance between both of them. It's kind of like revenue and margin. It's a similar concept. So that's the two KPIs we use for this one. But then very importantly, for the second part of this basically, is where are you storing your inventory? Let's say you have to store, there's MOQ, whatever. The place you store is absolutely crucial. You can't use DCs as storage centers. So common DCs are like FBA, WFS, sometimes your warehouse. It depends on how you use it. And I just wanted to do a quick cost breakdown. We just did this for our team actually last week, and I wanted to share it with you guys. Let's say you had a standard pallet at various locations. So I want to compare the from the cheapest to the most expensive. So the cheapest would theoretically be your warehouse. And the reason I mentioned your warehouse is I'm assuming you have an empty slot for this pallet. Obviously, then it's free because the fixed costs are the same. And I'll get into a little bit more of that later. But let's go into more like common examples. So let's jump into standard 3PL. Standard 3PL rates, they're approximately, let's say, $13 a pallet per month. Obviously, when we're getting maybe a little bit better rates than that, we leverage volume. But let's just assume it's $13 a pallet per month, the standard rate. What that would be for a year is $150 to store this pallet. And I actually have the numbers here, so that's why I'm kind of going through it. So the first option is obviously the standard option. So that's around $150 per month, per year, sorry, for storing that pallet. The second option, the second most affordable option is AWD. That would be approximately $432 per year. So you can see already tripled. So it's actually almost more than tripled actually. And then the third option, let's say WFS, Walmart Fulfillment Center, you're looking at $1,080 per year. And then the fourth option is Amazon FBA, the most expensive one. It's around $1,202 per year. So you can see if you're storing a pallet, and this goes, even if it's just an item or whatever it is, you don't want to store an FBA. You're going to get it for around 10% of the cost for storing in a 3PL. And that's why we shifted a lot of things and going back to dynamic, that's over there. And not even getting into FB, there's actually other disadvantages. There's aged inventory surcharge fees, which is for longer tail items. That's in addition to the $1,202. And then there's intangible stuff where they're gonna see that you have excess capacity at FBA, and they're going to slash your capacity limits. And actually, we ran one of these issues. Thankfully, we resolved it. I talked about how we did that over here, but that's also another reason you don't want to store FB. So you have to get ruthless with how much inventory you have and where you have it to make sure you have it in the right places. The 10th point is the importance of leveraging volume. So this comes into two categories. The first one is fixed costs, and the second one is non-fixed costs. And you're gonna be able to leverage volume to save money on both. So for fixed costs, this is more obvious. Let's get into a warehouse. Let's say, for example, this warehouse right here, it's 10 grand a month. Whether we're shipping 1,000 units a month or 100,000 units a month, we're still gonna pay that 10 grand. But the per unit cost obviously varies significantly. If we're shipping 1,000 units a month, then we're paying $10 per unit on storage. But if we're shipping 100,000 units, then it goes down to 10 cents per unit. Sorry, not on storage, I meant on rent. So that's a significant change, obviously, on fixed costs. And there's a lot of other ones like this. The ERP system, WMS, warehouse management systems, other SaaS tools. So you can think of many different various products that are fixed costs that are stable within this. And then the other factor of this is even non-fixed costs, you're still able to leverage bulk volume discounts. So just the cardboard examples, when you order more cardboard, it's less for the factory to make them. So we're able to leverage costs on there. Another big example is carriers and shipments. So the FTL that I mentioned, that's kind of actually related back to the fixed cost. It's $700 a truckload, whether they put a unit or 10,000 units or whatever. They charge us on the truck, they don't care. But another one that's not as fixed is like, let's say LTL, less than truckload. They charge us per pallet. When we're taking up more slots, we get a cheaper per pallet rate. So just as an example, a few days ago we were shipping 8 pallets. It was like coast to coast. So unfortunately very expensive. But 8 pallets were around $1,300. We were able to add additional volume that we needed a little bit later, but I was like, might as well ship it now to 10 pallets for now $1,500. So yes, we paid $200 more, but the per pallet cost was significantly cheaper. Now that I mentioned all 10 points, I wanted to get into the bonus. And this one is absolutely critical because forgetting about this neglect or takes away all the 10 points. Actually, it could be worse. It could take into the negative. And this bonus point is related to monitoring inventory shrinkage and inventory accuracy shipping rates, because losing inventory can actually easily take away all of your profit margin, not being accurate. I just want to mention a quick example. Let's say this styrofoam cup here costs 15 bucks. Hopefully it never costs 15 bucks, but let's just say as an example, you never know with inflation. It costs $15 and each one makes you $3. We're selling it for $30. You have a net margin of, let's just say, 10%. So let's say we lose one of these, we're $15 in the hole. So if I'm making $3 on each, I'm gonna have to sell 5 just to make up for the loss on this $15 item. So imagine if I send 6 of these in, right? And I lost just one of them. That entire batch of 6 units, I'm not profitable at all. And that's very common. So imagine if you're at 10% net margin rate. Let's say out of every 10 units you ship in, you lose one of them, you're down from 10%, maybe down to 3 or 4%. I don't know the math exactly off the top of my head. But that's why inventory shrinkage and inventory accuracy is such an important KPI. and it's a hidden cost for so many brands that we've talked. And I want to make sure that you're tracking it similar to how you track sales. So all in all, supply chain is grossly neglected. It's honestly disgusting how much people don't even care about it. They look at optimizing SEO or ads, but at times, especially in e-commerce businesses, it's one of the largest line items, and people forget about it so much. So optimizing for it, making sure that you're consistently revisiting it, every single part of the process, how you can redo it. Think about the 10 points that I mentioned today, how you can implement them in your, obviously, your situation, your business. If you found supply chain helpful or relevant for you in general, make sure to check out actually this video. We're talking about supply chain all the way from factory to customer doorstep. I go a full overview, whiteboard it. If you are a brand doing over $1 million in sales, come check us out at Voadera.com and see if we can help you out. And also, if you have any questions, leave a comment down below. I'll try to answer all of them, and make sure to like and subscribe for more of these videos.